Hi, I'm Gayle Forman. I'm the author of Just One Day, which is the first of a duet, and this one is about a girl named Allyson, and she is in Europe, and she meets a Dutch guy named Willem, spends a day with him, and that day winds up completely changing her life in ways that she never could have expected. The companion is Just 1 year, and that follows Willem's story and looks at how that day has also transformed his life. I am actually a bit of both. So I think the key to traveling well is planning it so that you can actually completely let go. So what I will do is I will plan very well, like where I'm going to go, and especially when I arrive, I always want to have somewhere to stay when I arrive somewhere. But then once that happens, and I know that I have a place to kind of put my stuff and relax, then what I do, and especially my husband and I travel this way, we just leave. We walk out the door and get lost. And that's the thing. So the certain amount of sort of planning and knowing that you have money in your pocket or where a bank is or how to change the money and knowing all of that and a few key phrases in case you get completely lost, that allows you to completely let go and travel the way that Willem travels. So I have both of them in me because I think that to either extreme, you can run into trouble if you go too far the Allyson way, then you rule out any kind of surprise. And if you go too far the Willem way, you can kind of wind up, in the middle of the night driving through Kazakhstan with a taxi driver who runs out of gas and you have no money and it's freezing. And yes, that did happen to me. It's not usually that instantaneous. I mean, usually the way books happen with me is it's not like I've seen something, it's like, oh, I want to write about that. Mostly the ideas that come to me for novels are things that happen to me or ideas or experiences that happened years ago, and they take kind of a while to sort of simmer and percolate to a point where they seem like a novel. So the interesting thing about both of these books is how so much of the traveling I have done in the last, almost 30 years of my life, no, 20 years of life, yeah, about 25 years of my life, how bits and pieces of that have gone into both of these books. People I've met, names, just the slightest little detail. And these are people who I've met once, maybe spent a few hours with, or less than that, couldn't even tell you their names. But that travel experience kind of wound up there. Or it might be a composite. We're in Australia now. In Just One Day, Allyson meets up with these Australians. Are they any particular Australians that I met? No, but they're like every warm, welcoming, embracing Australian traveler that I met throughout the years. So that's the kind of thing where it kind of comes in. Will Sydney ever wind up in a novel? Possibly, if I have another travel thing, or some element of what I learned here. Possibly, who knows? It was an accident, for lack of a better word. I like to say that Mia playing the cello was the big surprise of If I Stay. She showed up as a cellist, and I didn't know anything about cello. Shakespeare was a similar kind of surprise of these books. I knew that I wanted Allyson I knew she was going to be on this sort of very touristy cultural trip, and I knew I wanted to open the book in England. So it was obvious to me she would be in Stratford-upon-England, and so, it was an obvious step that if she was there, she was seeing Shakespeare, and so I chose Hamlet as a very, very obvious play. And then the distraction, the thing that kind of changes everything, are these sort of cool group of thespians, and they're putting on this kind of underground play of Twelfth Night. And I thought that would be the end of it. But as I got further into it, I realized when Allyson sort of has this breakdown and has to rebuild her life and herself, one of the things going to happen is instead of taking all of these pre-med courses as she's supposed to be doing, she's going to kind of take a class about Shakespeare, and this class was going to be pivotal. So once I realized that, I had to do some research, and I was very fortunate because that summer, the Royal Shakespeare Company, which is in the UK, they were putting on all these productions in New York, and so I went and saw 3 or 4 of them. And the first one that I saw was As You Like It, and it was a play that I'd never seen before. And as I watched it, it was such an amazing production and an amazing play, and I just sort of sat there with my heart in my throat, and I was kind of breathless and on the edge of my seat. And so I thought, okay, maybe that will be one of the plays that, you know, has an effect on Allyson. So then I got a hold of it, and as I was reading it, and doing the scene where Allyson is reading out loud, I couldn't believe it. It almost seemed tailor-made. It is so much about, you know, people running away and pretending to be one thing and saying one thing and meaning another. It was just, it felt completely as if I had written the book around As You Like It, or as I like to think, As You Like It had been written specifically for my book. And then it carried on into Willem's story in just 1 year, because the play had continued resonance. And I think that's what's so amazing about Shakespeare, is all these years later, you can find so much resonance in the work. You know, she's such a helicopter parrot, and it would be really easy to sort of take it one step further and just make her kind of an awful character and just demonize her. But I didn't want to do that. So she wasn't fun to write. She was actually hard to write because I felt bad for her. I knew why she was trying to control Allyson's life. I knew what she had given up, and I didn't think that it was actually the smartest move for her to have given up everything to raise her child and to make that her job. Didn't see it fulfilling her. I didn't see it fulfilling Allyson. So I felt really sorry for this woman who, there's that line that she says to Allyson where she's like, you know, you make it sound as if I've been laid off my job, and that's how it feels for her. So she wasn't fun because she wasn't just like villainous, but I kind of understood her, and you know, was glad when Allyson started to say, no, you can't do that. But I did feel bad for her, even though I felt like she treated her daughter pretty terribly. You know, it's funny because I found Allyson a frustrating character, and I'm never quite sure if it's because I'm so unlike her or if I was so like her. The one thing that I feel like Allyson and I have in common is that travel transformed us and changed us from the people we were on our way to becoming to the people we did become. So I had very different parents. They were very kind of hands-off, do your own thing. But one thing that they did do is when I was 15, I'm like, I want to go live abroad. And they're like, okay. And they really pushed it. And I was an exchange student in England when I was 16. And then that was the year that changed everything, because I came back from that and I had an English accent, and I told my parents, I shall not be going to university. I'm going to the University of Life. And then I saved money, and when I graduated high school, I went back to Europe for about 3 years. And that really, really changed the trajectory of my life, as it did Allyson. So I was not tentative like Allyson. I was not controlled like Allyson. But I think everybody has experienced what Allyson experiences, which is these moments where you look at the person you are, you look in the mirror, and it's like, this isn't who I want to be. Inside me is somebody else, and she's somebody bigger or braver or bolder, and I want to be that person, and I don't know how, but that's what I want to be. And how do I get there? And I have definitely had those experiences in my life, and those are very scary moments, but they're also very kind of powerful moments, because you realize, like, that person's in me, and it's up to me to become that person. So in that way, I am like Allyson. I gave Allyson some of my travel experiences too. Like, one of the things that I wanted to show in the book is that while travel is wonderful and transformative, it's not because of like seeing the beautiful artwork and eating the wonderful food and meeting the wonderful people, although meeting the wonderful people is really key. But some of the really great thing about travel is how hard it is, and how you are constantly out of your comfort zone and feeling like an idiot. And so once you get used to that, like when you keep pushing your comfort zone, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that means the realm of places that you feel comfortable in grows. And that is why I think travel is so important. You can do that in things that aren't necessarily, you don't have to travel to expand your comfort zone, but travel is a very effective way to do that. My favorite character in Just One Day is Dee. And Dee's an interesting one because he was a character who I imported in from a novel that I wrote that I ended up shelving. And once I brought him in, I'm like, oh my God, I have written the complete stereotypical sassy black gay sidekick. and I didn't want to do that. And so Dee evolved, and he became somebody who everybody sees him and sees him a certain way because he's poor, he's black, he's a scholarship student, and he's gay. So people will see him and respond to him based on this kind of very narrow idea of who he is. And he will completely use that. Like, he'll either throw it back in their face or work it to get the scholarships, because he is so much smarter than all of those people, and he knows how to do that. And in doing so, he's like taking on all these different identities and subverting them. And I just wound up going from that sort of total stereotype to somebody who was the smartest person in the book, and perhaps the smartest character of any character that I've ever written. And I wish Dee existed because I would make him be my best friend. I feel like anything I tell you is a spoiler, but I can tell you that it opens with Willem, and he's in an ambulance. So there you have it, and that a lot of the things that you suspect about Willem are true, but maybe not. Maybe you don't have the full story. So I don't want to give it away, because any little thing is a spoiler, even telling you like what the time frame of the story is. I just do think that you finish that book very satisfied and knowing what you need to know about the future of those two characters.